Welcome to the Storytellers Podcast, where we dive into exploring the magic and mystery of this human experience through psychology, spirituality, and of course, storytelling. I'm your host, Bela Divine. I am a Mexican mystic, a mentor, a trauma specialist, and naturally a storyteller. And for today's episode, we have a really special guest and a dear friend. Her name is Mia Magik. She is a real life witch. And we had the most fascinating conversation about witchcraft, magic, intuition, connecting to nature, connecting to the Great Mother. And we dove into so many of Mia's personal stories as a real life witch. It was so insightful and fascinating. So I can't wait for you to listen to it. And let's go ahead and dive right in. Mia, I'm so excited to have you here today. I would love to know what led you to fall in love with magic and what helped you discover your connection to being a witch and that you are a witch.
I am a witch, yes. It's been so many things. I grew up in a really beautiful place. I know you and I have talked about the sort of mystical nature of where we come from. Mm-hmm. And so I'm from the old growth redwood forest in Northern California, the oldest and largest living beings on the planet. And I grew up with nature as the temple. And in a very small town where my parents happened to have come from nothing and been these total dirty hippies who just happened to create something successful. My parents invented roof racks. And so we had this beautiful outdoor lifestyle my whole childhood. And a lot of people didn't get me. A lot of people didn't live the way that my parents lived. They didn't do the kinds of things that we liked to do. And so I would just get lost in my fairy tales, in my stories, in my books. And in books, there was magic and there was adventure and it was okay to be big and bold and courageous. And I didn't see that in my immediate external reality, but I would see it in my imagination. I would see it in my own heart and in what I desired for myself. And so I spent a very long time, longer than I would care to admit, pretending like I knew that what was in my stories, all that magic, only existed there. It's only in my books and it's not real because that's what everyone told me. And people bullied me and tormented me and I was such a loser, like the biggest loser. And it really became that magic was this solace, this respite. It was a place where I could go and dive into possibility and potential in a way that felt really comforting and really soothing to me. And ultimately, after many years of living a total muggle life, just being asleep and responding to everything in my life through my wounding and my patterning and my programming, I finally just started doing really deep inner child work, which I know you're a big fan of too. Mm-hmm. And my inner child just wanted to feel magic again. She just wanted to feel that there was magic alive in the world, or that I was capable of accessing and actualizing that magic in my life. And so once I started feeling like, oh, maybe I could make what was real in my books, maybe I could turn my fantasies into my reality. And I started doing that. And I started pursuing what that looked like and finding my favorite book as a kid. The girl was a healer. She had healing magic. That was her gift. And when I started realizing that the way that God or the goddess or the divine was channeling through me was to help others heal, and obviously because I was healing myself first and foremost, I just started to believe that magic might be real again. And the more I believed it was, the more it kept proving itself to me and showing itself to me. And the word witch means wise. And so it's all about wisdom. And my lived experience taught me that magic, if you believe in it, it's like we say you have to see it to believe it. And magic is the opposite. You have to believe it to see it. And so that started happening for me. And because witch means wise, I realized that wisdom is just a collection of your lessons that you receive throughout the challenges in your life and your hardships and your pain. And so if you are embodying your wisdom, if you're learning those lessons and integrating what you've learned and making that how you walk forward in your life, then you're a witch. And so the more that magic came to me, it became, and this hat obviously did its whole own thing. The hat had its whole life of its own, but it really just showed me that this was an important part of giving people permission who'd been just like me, who thought that magic was only in books or in fairy tales, but fairy tales are how we've safeguarded magic and power throughout time. As a psychotherapist, you know that, like all this Jungian psychology and so many of the descriptions in myth were used to describe us. They're used to share how our brains and our power and our anger exists. And so fairy tales have really just been a way to keep magic and power alive throughout the millennia. And I'm so grateful that they helped me remember who I am.
I love that so much. And so I'm really curious. Well, when I think of, like you, I grew up being a very fantastical, connected to magic woman, especially coming from an indigenous lineage. I felt like I was never invalidated in terms of how I saw the world. My imagination was never invalidated. And so I grew up practicing rituals and ceremonies, and also just really taking my reality to wild places within my own mind. I'm curious, what was your first experience that you remember kind of practicing magic, and what did that look like for you?
Oh man. For me, there was just a lot of just fantastical visioning. I would write these stories about the future that I was going to have. I would play fairies and magic and exist in the world just in a very magical way. But for me, I think what was most interesting is that everything was magical for a certain time. And I went to a totally hippie little school where like there was this place called the Imagination Loft. And in the Imagination Loft, the 4 or 5 kids that could go up there, you could create any reality that you wanted as long as everyone agreed on it together. And so I would be the captain of these ships, and we would be just like dealing with, stormy seas. And it was really all about how are we utilizing our power and our magic to overcome whatever this perceived challenge is. And so there were wands and there were spells, but it was mostly that I would write. And this has happened for me as I've grown older as well, but I would write these stories that have come true. So many things that I would write poems or little fairy tales about that I didn't know would become my own future. So I was literally writing my future in my stories. And it didn't have to look like rituals and it didn't have to look like anything structured. It was that I was experiencing my power every day and until it became unsafe to do so.
That is so beautiful, because for anyone who has had their intuition or their magic invalidated, Mia's story is just a testament to the fact that your intuition and your natural childhood experiences are often so connected to magic in the first place. To me, magic is a lens through which we look at life. It's an openness to seeing what the mystery holds for us. I'm curious, for anyone who thinks of magic as this like elusive, mysterious term, how would you define magic and what does it mean to you?
I think that the fact that we're circling a giant ball of fire on a spinning organic spaceship at hundreds of millions of miles an hour, not flying off, is pretty magical. And so life inherently is magic. And I believe that our magic is just our power. We call it supernatural, but the word natural is in there. It is natural for us to be magical. And as you and I both know, we get to share our own gifts and also witness allowing another person's gifts to emerge from them. And that's what's so beautiful is we all have these different gifts. We all have different skills. We all have different magic. And so to me, our magic is just our truth. It's our power. It's what's waiting, yearning, longing to awaken within us and always has. It lies dormant. We have these stories about junk DNA. Oh, you only use 10% of your brain and you're, 98% of your DNA is junk. It's like, That's impossible. Nature doesn't create like that. That's not how it works. Everything is utilized. Everything is recycled and composted. And so I think that magic is the part of us that has been, and I talk a lot about this, but the major religions have really stripped magic from us. They've villainized it. They've made it this bad, wrong, manipulative, scary, dangerous thing. And it's like, okay, so my power is scary and dangerous only in the face of the powers that be. If you're trying to oppress or suppress another person, the easiest way to do that is to convince them that there's something wrong with them and convince them that they're bad, or that, there's a repercussion, or there's going to be consequences to them doing whatever it is that they're doing. And so for me, magic is our birthright. It's an inherent part of us. It's the sleeping dragon within us. It's the ways that our brains can function. Like, we see people's spiritual gifts coming online more and more. Oh, wow. I like to call it my intuition, right? So my intuition is awakening. I'm hearing this voice, or I'm feeling this sensation of this being wrong for me. And I'm following, I'm listening, or not. I'm starting to see the future. I'm having prophetic dreams. I'm able to heal people. Everyone's gifts are unique, and we weave this tapestry of life together. And we need the colors, we need the contrast in order to make a beautiful masterpiece of art. There's dark and there's light. And so I think that there's so much that magic is, but I feel like it's a natural part of ourselves that in this process and progress of human evolution, we're being asked to uncover it. And it's a challenging journey, especially with the ways that religion has turned our power against us and made it something that we should be afraid of. It's like the only thing to be afraid of is someone that tells you to fear your power. Like, that's a problem.
It's like that quote that they say, they burned the witches at the stake, but no one ever asked or thought to be suspicious of the people who were doing the burning. And it's true that religion has demonized witchcraft so much throughout history, and the church has really erased so much of the ancient history of the Great Mother and the goddess. And I know that you are such a big advocate for the goddess, and I'm curious to know what you might be able to share with listeners about the goddess. And also, have you ever had any experiences with people who come from a more religious background and who feel afraid of you because you're a witch? And what has that crossover, or, what have those conversations looked like? I'm just curious for any religious listeners who might be watching. Yeah,
it's been a really beautiful journey for me in that actually people are very surprised at how few haters and how little judgment and shame I get. I get like the odd Bible verse on a YouTube comment, but I have been incredibly lucky with the way that I speak out about the pain that the church has caused. I mean, look at your ancestors, right? Colonizing. The reason why the entirety of Central and South America speak Spanish, a European language, is because they went in and wiped out and totally massacred hundreds of thousands of people. And that happened all over the world. That's why we have these major Latin languages all over the planet. And so for me, what's interesting is that the Great Mother is really, she was the original God, because everyone comes out of the mother. And before we had paternity tests and microscopes, they didn't know that it took a man's seed to impregnate a woman. It would be like, oh, she's pregnant. Like, wow, look at that. She did it, good for her. And so life comes from the mother, comes from women. It always has. That doesn't mean that we're better than men, but it does mean that our creative capacity is greater. And so originally, when you look at every ancient civilization, which I know you're familiar with, God was the mother. And there was a father God. It was both. It was God and goddess as counterparts, as divine union, as balance, as yin and yang, as masculine and feminine. And then when the church came in, and again, even villainizing witchcraft, when you look at the old languages that those come from, witch means wise, craft means strength or skill. So you're strengthening the skill of your wisdom. And then in the Bible and all of these religious texts, it's become that strengthening the skill of your wisdom is evil and manipulation and bad and horrible and dangerous. So it's like even that message is like, well, clearly not, but okay. And the consequence was death. So it was like, if you go against us, we're going to kill you. So that is where a lot of silencing, I know that we both teach people how to reclaim their voice, and that's a really big part of the witch wound that occurs and why people feel uncomfortable using their voices and speaking their truth, is because it could literally be life and death if you did that. So when you look at the Great Mother being kind of like who we think of as God, and then her counterpart, maybe say the Holy Spirit or the angels or something like that, what happened is that the Holy Mother became the Holy Father. We changed the sex of God from feminine to masculine. And then who was the Holy Father, which it's very in every ancient culture where we would have cows, goats, sheep. These are animals whose faces are very triangular and then their horns are rounded. And that's actually the shape of the womb. And those animals also, because of their capacity to be milked, they would feed us. They could nourish us without ever killing them. So those animals have always been sacred throughout many cultures because of the blessed abundance of that milk that would give us cheese and butter and fat and all these different nutrients that we needed in order to survive. And what do we have the devil look like now? He's a horned, hooved being, because that used to be the father. That used to be the masculine counterpart to the goddess. It was called the horned god. In every ancient civilization, if you look back, there is this father who's different than the mother, who works with the mother. And now, instead of them being divine counterparts, they've been pitted against each other. God's sex has changed. Now it's the Holy Father and the devil. And there was no evil before the church. It was just the underworld. It was just returning to the womb. And so that is a really big thing that I just try to help people awaken to. I would never speak out against Jesus. Loving your neighbor, the kingdom of heaven is within you. Like, there's so many beautiful tenets that I believe, if they are true messages of Jesus, then hallelujah, yes, let us live in alignment with those things, certainly. But the people who speak on his behalf, I have not experienced them actually living in alignment with those things. And so people tend to just be really grateful that I'm helping them see the truth. And it's such an interesting part. I just had the most beautiful experience recently. I went on a river trip in August through Idaho. And, we think of Utah being like the space where Mormons live, but apparently there's a lot of them in Idaho too. And I had no idea that basically this whole trip was Mormon guides, Mormon leadership. All of these people were Mormon, and they'd all been talking about the fact that there was a witch coming on the river trip, and they'd all checked me out and looked at my Instagram, and I'd had no idea until the last day when they told me. But we had so many profoundly beautiful conversations about God. They asked such poignant, potent questions about what does, if it's a great mother, if God is a goddess, as you call her, what does she want from us? And I just was like, well, what does any good mother want from her children? She wants them to find their purpose and experience love and joy and happiness, and not to feel too much pain, and to be able to grow strong from the pain that they do experience. And it was so beautiful to be able to remember, as someone who does have some qualms with organized religion, it was so beautiful to remember that those people, all people who are devoted to their religious beliefs, who are committed to God in their way, we're all just talking about the same thing in a different language and with different words. And it was deeply special for me to not only feel accepted, and their curiosity was really open-minded to me and to my perspective about the elements and how we relate to them, but also that they just wanted to know God even more deeply through another person's eyes. And so I feel really blessed that I got to have that experience, and that I got to learn as well, and remember that God is everywhere and everything in every single person's eyes, and it really doesn't matter what we call it or how we worship. It's a personal relationship. It's such a unique flavor and texture no matter who you are.
Yeah, your story reminds me so much of a recent experience that I had when I was in Peru. I spent a month there with my mom doing shamanic initiations with the Turpo lineage primarily. And the Turpos and the Queros in Peru are really special because the conquistadors never found them. They hid in the mountains.
Wow.
And so they're a pure lineage in the sense that they don't have this pain body of having been colonized. And so as a result, the transmission of their teachings is like so pure. And we were out there doing ceremonies and like, having rebirth rituals and ice melt and fire and, all of the symbolic teachings coming through. And one of the really profound things that my teacher said to me was that, for the Turpos and a lot of the indigenous lineages in Peru believe that for 500 years, the indigenous teachings prevailed, and it was this feminine way, this connection to Mother Earth, and really letting that lead. And then the conquistadors came, and it turned into a very masculine, the great father, and erasing the mother, and all of a sudden we inherit this divorce story of like the elusive mother that's nowhere to be found, and the father that is there, but we can never see him. We can never really like connect with him, even though we're constantly trying to. And so they believe that the next 500 years are all about kind of bridging that gap and kind of finding that like love story again, that balance between the masculine and the feminine. And I think that while, especially with what the church did with the more masculine teachings of the father, they were thrown so out of balance. But I do believe that there is wisdom to both. It's just a balance. And personally, I don't believe in a God that punishes or that hurts people. I believe in a God that teaches people. And so it's all about the perspective that you hold. I'm definitely really curious to hear a little bit more about how you would recommend that people who might be new to this idea of witchcraft or the Great Mother connect to nature. And how have you found your connection to magic in nature?
Well, there's so many things. But yeah, I love that. I think that that's so... There is a father nature too. It's not just Mother Nature. Of course, she is there. But when you look around at nature, it's making love all the time. Even the way that the hummingbirds and the butterflies send their little serpentine tongues down into the nectar of the flowers. Life is making love with itself all the time. And so there's just so much beauty in that. And I think that this love story is a remembrance too when we look at what has happened with fathers. So many fathers become neglectful, become distant. And now when you look at a good father, he's not punitive and disciplinary. He's holding space and he's supportive. And so I'm really looking forward to that reintegration and that love story too. And for me, the most important and simplest way to understand the magic in nature and in ourselves is you look at our bodies, right? So there's this physical, dense nature of our vessel. This is like, I'm here right now. The bones inside of you are like the stones in the mountains. And the muscles are like the clay and the dirt and the shale. And then there's rivers and creeks and streams of blood, waters flowing through you in every moment. What do we exchange with the natural world? Breath, wind, everything that we inhale, the plants and the trees and the algae made for us. And then we exhale and give it back to them, returns home to them. And then there is this electrical impulse in our bodies, this fire, this energy in every single moment. We're not plugged into anything, and yet we are electrical beings. It's the same light as the sun. It's the same energy that's coming up from the ground when we put our bare feet on the earth. And then there is the fifth sacred thing, this holy, elusive, mysterious element, the spirit, the vibration, the ether, the unexplainable, ineffable oneness of it all, that which animates all of life. And you can just look and see that you are magic and you are the earth. You are the same as this planet. And I believe that's how I really teach about it, because your waters are your emotions. They're your tears, they're your sweat, they're the sweet waters between your legs, they're all of our sacred juices. So there's water. Wow, creativity, sexuality, emotion. Okay. Oh, then this dense physical reality. Well, what occurs in my physical reality? Well, it's like material possessions, my home, my car, my body, my health, my friendships, my relationships. Okay, that makes sense. Well, what about fire? Well, it's motivation, it's drive, it's energy, it's how we take action. What are we doing? Are we committed to walking forward, or are we just like letting our spark go out? And then the breath, the air, right now, just what we're doing. I got to breathe in order to breathe out, to share story with you. And the breath and the air element is of our minds and of our voices and our communication and our expression, what we like to wear, all of it. And then the spirit is that thing that makes you and me, but us know that it's actually all one. And we're just in this little illusion, this hologram where we're pretending to be separate in order to learn, like you said. But that's where I find the magic in nature, and you can go out and learn. Every tree has significance. The way that all of the communication in nature is happening underneath the ground, under your feet, through the root systems with the mushrooms and all of the whole biosphere that exists underground. And for me, nature is not only, you can look at all of the thousands of studies that are being done on forest bathing and on grounding and earthing and being. Blue space and green space are two different types of brain matter that are created by being in a strictly natural environment, either sitting by water where it's just the sounds of water, or sitting in like a jungle in a green space where all you're hearing is the wind rustling through the leaves and the sounds of the birds. Doing those things literally create more powerful, stronger brain matter in your body. And so you can look at all the studies, or you can just go out and experience it yourself. You can just go out and feel and listen. And what my practice has become over the last many years is just see what I can hear from her. And I love doing channeled writing practices. This is a practice, and I'm happy we can share this. We'll put it in the show notes. This is a practice of mine. And it's just a beautiful little meditation. And then you say, I call upon my higher self, Mother Nature, these trees. Please write to me, through me, anything I'm meant to receive in this moment. And if you are open, whatever that thing is, whether it's your highest self or your dragons or the clouds, they will communicate to you and through you, and you will have a letter from that thing. And that was one of the most powerful ways that I started connecting to nature and listening to her. And then she would ask me to do things and want me to try something new or take action in a different way. And every time I listened, every time I followed, something magical would happen. Something would change. I would grow. I would rise. I would fruit and flower and blossom. And so for me, nature is my greatest teacher. And the more I've been committed to her and devoted to her, and like every single thing that I'm wearing is secondhand. Well, this is not my hat, it's really hard to get secondhand witch hats. There's not a lot of them, but everything else, I commit to that. Even my cloud couches at home, everything I get used as much as I can, because I know that there's enough stuff toxifying her. I know that her body, imagine if someone just like taped a bunch of plastic to my body. I'd be like, what the fuck? Like, get this off of me. This is not mine. Like, I don't want this here, And so even like, I had some people over for the new moon last night, and they're all like, oh, yes, I just have to go to the bathroom. I'm like, pee outside. They're like, what? I'm like, you're at my house. You pee outside. We're not wasting the water. I'm like, what? It's not about like the waste or the water. It's like we have a well. But the waters, our emotions, our creativity, our sexuality, we don't want to toxify them. That's part of the problem that we're experiencing in this world, is that our sexuality has been shamed. Our emotions have been made to be weak or bad or wrong or dangerous. And our creativity is something that we're just not encouraged to express. Like, no, go build someone else's dream. Get a job working for someone else. Don't do the thing that makes you feel alive. And so that's really how you find the magic in nature. That's how you can create a deeply healing, nourishing, clear connection and communication and bond between you and the natural world. You don't have to be as extreme as I am. I'm extreme, But when I have done the things that I know are better for her, I watch her give me things that are better for me. I watch her bless me with more abundance and beautiful relationships and amazing friendships and harmony and fun and growth in every area of my life. And I truly believe that our planet and our people, like you're talking about, these people who never were colonized. And so they have this relationship and they can believe in this love story and this reintegration of mother and father. And that's what I believe is possible. And I learned that from nature. And so my goal is to help teach people how to remember, to listen to her, to feel her, to connect with her, and to bring home that that father nature, that father sky, into a way of relating with the solid structure and stability that nature reminds us of too, in those strong pillars of trees and so many other things. There's plenty of phallic plants out there, but they show us that we have the capacity to find that balance too, and to stand strong as warriors, sacredly protecting this planet, and also embody her and be emanations of her in our own creative blossoming as well.
I love what you shared about nature being this great teacher in creativity specifically, because I think right now so many people are experiencing this stifling of their authenticity and feeling this extreme pressure to be like everybody else.
Yeah.
But when you're in nature, you can really learn about, nothing in nature is rushed. There are seasons. There are seasons for blossoming. There are seasons for wintering, and for kind of just allowing things to grow. And then, I also believe that nature is so inspiring for our authenticity, because when we're in nature, we aren't being judged. And so that practice that you were sharing of asking, the goddess or nature to speak through you, when you're in nature and you have a practice like that, nothing is going to stop your authentic essence from shining through. You can really express it in such a potent way. I'm really curious to know a little bit about this book that you've been working on, Intuition. I would love to know maybe like a story or a lesson that you could share with listeners about hearing your intuition, because I do believe that so much of the fear mongering that happens in our day-to-day life is really about and really so much of the suppression of the inner witch is getting people to trust in society's dream over their own intuition.
Yeah. I like to call it intuition, because that puts the wisdom into it. And wisdom is not the difference between knowledge and wisdom, like I was saying before, it is embodied, right? You can know something conceptually, but what are you doing about it? Are you living in accordance to that knowledge? And when you are, that's wisdom. So Intuition comes out January 30th. I'm very excited. And it's all about not just receiving the message, not just hearing it or listening, having that little voice, that little nudge, but following through, taking the action, and what arises on the other side. And so I shared this story for the first time, I think, in the book. And I was on the island of Crete, which is my favorite Greek island. Greece is one of my soul homes, where every time I go there, I just have the most beautiful wild activations. And I was leaving my Airbnb, had a totally different plan. And my host had left this little picture map for me. And I just unfolded the little map, and I was like, I wonder if there's anything close by while I'm on my way out to wherever I was going. And I just look, and there's this tiny little icon, and it's one of the things that means ruins. It's like a little Colosseum. And they're like, oh, there's this little ruins, Polythenia. I'm like, okay, cool, great, whatever. It's right here. I'm just pop by. And I went, and I was about to pass by the little plaque. And I passed by it a couple times wandering around the site, and finally something in my intuition was like, read the plaque. And I was like, okay. And I went over, and there had been a 9,000-year-old temple to Artemis, who's the first goddess that I really started working with. Mia Magik and Artemis were my two first real goddess guides.
And for those who don't know, can you just let us know, who is
Yes, Artemis is the great mother goddess in the Greek tradition. She is the goddess of the wild, of the wilderness, of childbirth. She's a huntress. She carries a bow. The doe is her sort of her totem, and the owls are more on the Athena side, but she's changed a lot. But the way that Athena has become this sort of vicious warrior, and she was originally the goddess of wisdom. And when you talk about wisdom, you would have seen how in war you could actually prevent as much violence as possible. That would be the ideal strategy. So even that has really changed. And now she's supposed to have popped out of Zeus's head. So a lot of, from a goddess, right? So a lot of the Greek myths have changed over time when you look back to the ancient history. But now, and then Artemis was their main mother goddess. And again, of the wilds of nature, the lady of the lake, as we know from Avalonian and sort of more the Celtic traditions, using water magic, scrying with water, baptisms, holy rituals. baptism is way older than the church, way, way, way older. Been being done for thousands of years.
And so is the cross.
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to mention that because the cross is actually
symbol.
Yeah, it's been used, as symbolism in so many indigenous cultures around the world. It really originally represented the 4 directions and the 4 elements in nature.
And the masculine and feminine, that direct pillar, and then the horizontal, the above and the below. And that's what intuition is really all about. It's a discovery, it's an exploration of everything that happens above, the same as like these bodies and these elements. Well, what does it mean underneath? What's the reflection? And so I was climbing around and saw this plaque, 9,000-year-old temple that had been knocked down and turned into a church of the 99 Fathers. Mm-hmm. So this church where the goddess had been banished, where this punitive father is supposed to be worshipped, still had the inscriptions, still had the words praising the goddess on the very stones of this church. And I read that and I was like, whoa, okay, there's some reason that I'm here. And I went and sat there was a few little sort of an outer rim, and I just sat there. And I could feel in the ruins of this temple, it was like, I want you to just come and lay naked upon me. And I want you to lay upon me until you can hear my song. And I was like, okay, well, we'll see how that goes. And I started up the hill, up to the top of the mountain. And I could just feel like something was like, take off your clothes right now. I was like, what? But my car was the only one there. And I just could feel in my bones that I was safe. So one, being out in nature is something that really triggers the witch wound, because if you were caught out in nature doing rituals, gathering herbs, communicating with animals, singing to the waters in any way, which again, all of the plants, that was our medicine before pharmaceuticals, everything came from nature. We had no petrochemicals making little pressed pills for us. It was like, is there a plant for that? Yes. And if you were found out in nature, you would be accused of witchcraft and killed. Again, the consequences were death or torture. And so I could feel that, all the resistance just rising up. Like, what? No, I don't want to do that. And I took my shirt off and I hiked up part of the mountain, and I was like, okay, I'm the only one here. I'm safe. It's okay. I'm doing this. And I sat down and I did a channeled writing at this stone gate, just this massive, you could just feel the power. And it was telling me to put my eyes in the palms of my hands and the soles of my feet. And then to put my ears in the palms of my hands and the soles of my feet, and touch things and walk upon things and see how I could see and hear and feel using different modes of sensing. It's like, okay, that feels nice. And I would like put my hand on the stone and see and hear and feel getting these flashes and visions of the majestic nature of what this temple had once been. And I keep climbing and I like take all my clothes off. I'm like hiking naked. I'm like, whoa, this is super edgy. What am I doing? And I got to the top of the mountain. And this was one of the first places, like 10,000 years, where they've had running water. They created water cisterns and systems to have running water in this ancient little tiny town. And I'm at the top of the mountain, and she just says, lay upon me until you can hear my song. And I laid down on the earth. And I laid there for like 5 hours and just had my head flat on the ground and was watching these little green spiders, the same color as the grass, spin webs between 2 blades of grass. I'm like totally sober, just like laying here watching all of these little flowers and things happen. And after many hours, I felt and I heard this vibrational hum and song that I had never heard before. And it was so deep and so primal. And it was like she was showing me her heartbeat and how I was connected to it. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my entire life. So transcendent, changed the entire trajectory of who I was after that moment. And I have since spent many other 5-hour sessions laying on the earth like that. And she finally, after several, like maybe another hour of just listening to her, the whole vibration shifted immediately. And I was like, whoa. And I could feel this energy of like, get up, get your clothes on. And I did. And I got up and I could see like way down on the other side of the plateau and where I was, a man had entered. And it was like, she told me, she let me know, hey, this time that we've had together is complete. And now it's time for you to get up and go on about your day and about your way. And it was just such a profound example of that when we listen, not only did I receive blessing and healing and benevolence and such gifts from listening to her, but by listening, I also learned how important it is to follow and to hear her guidance and do something about it on both sides, that I was safe at the beginning and then when the safety container was complete. And if I hadn't listened and thought, oh no, I'm just going to keep going, like he might have walked up there and scared the shit out of me or whatever, and it would have been fine. But that's truly, for me, that's what intuition is all about, is taking action, saying yes, listening to that voice and not ignoring it. You've been programmed and taught to ignore that voice your whole life. Don't do it. Don't do it anymore, because what you receive from the goddess, from nature, from the universe, from magic itself when you listen is so transformative and so powerful that your life will never be the same, no matter how small that little
nudge
adjustment is. Yeah. Like that's the butterfly effect. It's not just something that we talk about in the spiritual community. It's part of chaos theory in physics. Something as small as the little lip of a butterfly's wing can have long-term change and impact. And that's really, I love to consider myself a sort of young Professor McGonagall, and she teaches transfiguration, and that's how we change one part of ourselves into something else, how we change pain into power or into purpose. And it's really been a beautiful journey for me to listen and follow through.
That is so beautiful, and I'm so excited to read your book when it's out. We'll tell all of the listeners where they can find it at the end of the episode. So I wanted to respond with a little suggestion for listeners around how you can hear your intuition. A lot of the times people confuse the voice of fear in their minds with intuition, and our subconscious mind, the narrative within our mind, has been programmed into us by our teachers, by our religious leaders, by our friends, by our family members, by, the ancestral wounds that have followed us for generations. And the reality is that your intuition isn't going to speak to you through the mind. It speaks to you through the body, through the senses, and through nature. And nature is such a great teacher of intuition. And so if you're ever struggling to hear your intuition, I really recommend moving your body to the point where your mind becomes silent. And once you're in that state of neutrality, you can ask yourself, like, what, is this decision going to fill my heart up? Is it going to drain me? Is it going to energize me? Is it going to drain me? And you could just pay attention to the sensations that you're feeling. But it's really important to clear that fear programming in the mind if you want to be able to really hear your intuition. I'm curious to hear like any other teachings that you might have around hearing your intuition, or perhaps a story around when you first began to really, hear and trust your intuition, what that was like.
Yeah, I think that the biggest piece for me was just finding God all around me. I was dating someone who was very religious, and I didn't have a relationship to God. This was like the tail end of my just deep slumber. And I just looked up one day and was like, oh man, I'm feeling really down. Should I just try and talk to God, see maybe what happens if there is a voice? And I was like, God? And the way that the wind rustled through the leaves and the way that the trees were shining in the sunlight, it was like, yes, I'm all around you. I've been waiting for you to ask me something or say anything. It's been a while, And so in that moment, I realized, oh, wow, it is me and nature. Those are the things that God created. Humans created concrete and buildings and cameras and microphones and all of that. And that's great. But God is in nature and in everything that he has created. And so for me, the other piece about it is really, we touched on the witch wound a little bit. So I like to think of, depending on whether you're a Harry Potter fan or not, but there is this inner Voldemort. There is this inner witch hunter. There is the voice of fear and ego and programming. And if you can sense even the texture of the voice, how does it feel, right? Okay, if you're not able to connect with your body, if you can't tell the difference between a sensation of expansion and contraction, which once you get to know your body, you will very easily be able to do that. But if you can't, try to feel, and some of us are auditory learners and some of us are visual learners and some of us are kinesthetic, which means more like in our senses kind of learners. So if you can see the voice that's talking to you, or if you can hear the voice that's talking to you, or if you can feel the voice that's talking to you, does it feel like something that is working for your highest good? Does it feel like something that wants to stretch and expand you? You're going to be asked to meet up against your edges and cross them. You're going to be asked, you might even be like shoved out of your comfort zone. I certainly have been many times. And there's a difference between I'm pushing you outside of your comfort zone in order to stretch you and expand you, or like this comfort zone actually is an illusion and, stepping outside of it is going to be something dangerous for you. And so the biggest thing for me is, how does it feel? If there is and if you can't feel how it feels, use your other senses. Okay, well, is there do I see a face to it? Is it that inner critic? Is it the voice of my dad who was abusive? Is it some bully and some, horrible person that tormented me when I was a little kid? Is that the voice that I'm hearing? Because that voice can be one that tries to keep us from success, tries to keep us small, tries to keep us down so that we're not threatening. And if it feels like that, it's fear, it's ego, it's not your intuition. But your intuition is going to ask you to do scary things. And so fear can be part of it. It can, oh my God, like, what am I gonna do? I don't know if I can do this. And then once you say yes, you prove to yourself that you are more powerful than you ever dreamed and than you ever thought possible. And so you can really use the texture of the voice or the vision that you get of the voice that's speaking to you, or the way that it lands in your body. Like, does this feel like that mean girl that used to torment me? Or does this feel like open arms and an embrace? And even though I'm afraid, I feel like if I take this step or this leap of faith, I'm going to be held. And that's the other thing about a leap of faith. Of course, it's going to be terrifying. But what happens when you do it is that either a net appears, or you grow wings, or you realize that the ground is an illusion anyways, or you do fall and you do hit the ground. And maybe you totally die to the old version of yourself, but then you rise reborn. And so that's what following your intuition every single time is going to push you and stretch you and make you bigger and better. And even in the moments where you don't, or you do fall victim to the fear, there's still an opportunity to say, okay, wow, I didn't listen this time. What will it look like when I listen next time? And how can I make sure that I commit to doing that?
Such an important teaching. And I would also really encourage you to not listen and ask for the advice and the opinions of the people that you love around you as much as you love them, your family members. If no one in your lineage has ever taken a leap of faith or invested in their mental health or been open about their spiritual gifts, I know a lot of my clients are women that come from spiritual lineages or come from an ancestry where there was this secret abuela that practiced witchcraft or that read tea leaves or something along those lines, but it was always kept quiet. Mm-hmm. And when we begin to tell our stories in safe spaces, and when we begin to tell the stories that maybe our ancestors didn't even have the opportunity to tell, we are able to heal. And so I really encourage you to not ask your partner and your family members and your friends what they think when you're doing something out of the box. You should really always look to people who have been where you want to go when you are looking to walk a new path and when you're learning to trust your intuition, something that we're not really taught to do at all.
Yeah, because those people are they're trying to keep you safe because they were convinced to be safe. Mm-hmm. So if they never took a leap into their dream life or did something that stretched them and they spent their lives building, again, somebody else's dream, just working for someone else's goal, of course they're going to tell you, oh, that's not a good idea. I mean, bless my parents. They still made their own dreams come true. And they still, with the life that I'm leading, with how I have exceeded their own expectations of their own lives, they still are like, oh, honey, I just don't think that's a good idea. Like, you probably shouldn't do that. And I'm like, thanks so much for your opinion. Love you so much. Bless your light. And I gotta go. Bye.
I feel like I can speak on behalf of so many of the leaders in our industry, in the spiritual and even in the psychotherapeutic world. I think none of us got here by listening to the people around us. I mean, my parents thought I was absolutely crazy when I was spending all my savings on learning how to heal my inner child and family constellations and ancestral healing. But I wouldn't be here if I hadn't taken that leap of faith and been willing to, have nobody's support behind me but my own. But that's where my intuition intuition led me, and I'm so glad that I listened. And, you know, we wouldn't have even met if we hadn't trusted that inner calling.
Yeah. And I think that that's the most important thing, is that real power and sovereignty, and it's the Virgo new moon as we're recording this. And the word virgin originally meant sovereign. It wasn't about not having had sex. It was about choosing so consciously who entered your body. Very much a description of the priestesses. The Vestal virgins were servants of Vesta, the goddess of the home and hearth in the Roman tradition. And that is the most important thing about your intuition, is that it is for you. It is your service. It is for you to become the highest, deepest, most expressed, magical, powerful version of yourself. And nobody else is going to be able to help you get there. Of course, mentors, teachers, they'll ask things to emerge from you. They will invite new layers and parts of you to come out. But your intuition and your path and the things that are scary and that nobody else is going to understand, that's what allow you to, and have certainly allowed us to step into these really unique, beautiful positions of power. And it's not power over, but it is inner power. It is such a deep wellspring of inner power that then we become like fountains overflowing, so that power helps to quench the thirst of others and helps to nourish them. And that is how you get there. If that's what you're seeking, is a life of magic and power and feeling like you are here and aligned with your purpose, there's no one else's opinion that matters like your own, straight up. And it's going to be hard because people might think you're crazy. And
it's true.
Like, great. The weirder, the better. Like, let's go.
Yeah, it's true. True power is not born from what you have or how much success you've attained or what people think of you. True power comes from you knowing that you are worthy in your authentic expression. And I think that's really the highest and most beautiful thing that we can do in this life, is just show up 100% as ourselves and get to know ourselves. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining me for this beautiful conversation, Mia. Where can our listeners find you? And again, can you remind us when we can expect to find your book?
Yes. So the book is out January 30th. You can get it in every place where books are sold. And all of my YouTube, Instagram, website is all Mia Magik, MIAMAGIK. And there's all kinds of juicy nuggets and beautiful things for you to step into your most magical life. And I'm always leading retreats and castles that are like going to Hogwarts for the week. So lots of fun things. And the book is a really great way to learn to speak this language that the universe uses to communicate with us. It's all symbolic and all really deeply integrating that as above, so below concept in order to understand how the world is speaking to you in every moment and know how to speak in return.
I can't wait to get my hands on it and read it. To everyone listening, thank you so much. It's so important to have these conversations, and even more important to be witnessed in the expression of your weird and your authenticity. And when you begin to have sisters with whom you can express your witchiness, a new level of surety arises within you. And if you haven't found your people yet, keep showing up as your most authentic witchy self, because that is how you find your people. And for anybody who is listening, if you leave a review on this podcast on iTunes or on Spotify, I will be sending you a free meditation. You can just DM me on Instagram or email hello@beladivine.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.